morning and or evening, depending on where you are in the world. Today is Wednesday, the 24th of June, 2020. I'm Brock Jennings.
And I'm Peter Clark.
And this is your friendly neighborhood Lutheran theology podcast, Stumbling Block.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody's commented on the fact that I make Spider-Man references.
I don't know, man. No one comments on much around here.
I know, but, everybody thinks that academics are out of touch with pop culture, and here I am making a pop culture reference.
It's a very old pop culture reference, but yes.
It's only like 40 years old, or 50 years old.
Or 60 years old. When did Spider-Man first come out?
Well, I was thinking the movies in the 70s, so I guess that would be 50 years, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man starts with the comic, which was first published in 1962.
Perfect! My generation. So 1962 for Spider-Man.
Yep.
It means I was born 26 years after that phrase first appeared, but I still consider it somehow my generation.
Whatever.
I mean, I feel like I'm sort of a child of the 60s. This surprises you why?
It doesn't surprise me. It just amuses me.
Yeah, well, it amuses everyone. So, Peter, what's new with you?
Well, so the iconoclasm of the current movement of the age has hit home for me in a way that I'm still processing, trying to come to terms with and understand, trying not to be overly judgmental of, but still there's a mourning, MOU mourning.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite statues got torn down last night.
And what statue was that?
Statue of Lady Forward outside the Madison State Capitol, the Wisconsin State Capitol in Madison.
Okay, who's Lady Forward? She's
this symbol of progress, of the progressive movement in Wisconsin. She was put up as a celebration of women's suffrage.
Mm. This is a white woman?
Yeah.
Mm. Do you know why it was torn down?
No explicit statement has been made as to why the statue was selected.
And do you know anything about Lady Forward that may have caused them to tear it down?
The only thing I can think of is that as a symbol of the progressive movement, she's failed. It just happened last night and details are still coming out. It makes me wonder if the movement isn't turning towards full-on iconoclasm.
Hold on. The name is Lady Forward?
Yeah, it's a statue outside the Wisconsin State Capitol.
Well, I sort of understand the one next to it, Colonel Hans Christian whatever. The name Colonel tells me something.
Well, but he was a colonel in the Union Army.
Yeah, but the Union Army could be just as racist as the Confederate Army.
And a verdant abolitionist.
And even the abolitionists could end up being horribly racist or having slaves, as Carol Anderson reminds us of Abraham Lincoln.
Right, but that one I'm not upset about.
Oh, okay.
That one I don't really care about. I didn't even know that statue was up.
Oh, okay. So Lady Forward, this is what is Lady Forward's actual name?
Forward.
Okay.
That's the statue is called Forward.
Okay. I'm trying to figure out who this person is historically.
It's not a person, it's an ideal.
It's an ideal. Okay, so then of the night of the.
I mean, it's like who was the Statue of Liberty historically? This is the Wisconsin Statue of Liberty has been torn down.
I understand. So then one would want to know. So I've got here women in the progressive movement up, and one would have to inquire as to was there something going on within that movement as a whole. Now that I understand that it's a symbol, that it's not somebody named Mrs. Forward who did something.
No.
Think okay. Now I have Lady Forward, Lady Liberty. Now I get it. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody tears Lady Liberty down, honestly. Although I imagine that would be harder.
That would be much harder.
But I wouldn't be surprised if somehow somebody figures out how to do it with enough cannonballs or something.
But it's this statue that's like, it's so fascinating because so many protests have rallied around Forward.
Mm-hmm.
It's been this focal point of the progressive movement in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
It's been this symbol. It's been a photo opportunity.
Yeah.
It's like deep in the blood of Madison. And I'm working really hard to not be judgmental. I'm working really hard to try and understand. But I'm also grieving this because this is like a part of my understanding of like how I became to be a progressive and a liberal and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like this is part of my Wisconsin identity.
Well, the first thing then that I want to know is maybe it's not actually Black Lives Matter protesters. There have been other people that are doing some of this that is unrelated, and there's this extremist right-wing group called the Boogaloo Movement.
Yeah, I'm familiar. I talked about that the other week, remember?
You did, but I'm hazy as to what you had said, and I heard about it again on Democracy Now!, and I'm still hazy on what it is.
They're trying to start a second civil war.
That part I knew.
This responsibility has been claimed by black progressives.
All right, then I want to know, then I would have to ask the historical question, if black progressives in this Black Lives Matter movement, then I want to know what was going on historically in the progressive movement of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, that, for instance, that women's suffrage movement, does that include women of color?
Historically, the initial women's suffrage movement was not focused, it was focused around white women.
Then that may be something, but I don't know. That one would have to dig into that. God, just when I think I'm done with history, here I am trying to figure it out.
That's one of the things that I'm wondering. And again, I'm trying to say this without judgment. I'm trying to understand, right? This movement seems to be turning towards iconoclasm.
I'm not sure I would go that far. But I'm interested in why you think it is turning toward iconoclasm.
Because regardless of what she originally stood for, like, regardless of the historical context, the original historical context, Forward, the statue Forward, Lady Forward, has constantly been reclaimed and recontextualized by the progressive movement. To the point that I again, this statue that I see as part of my understanding of what it is to be a Wisconsin progressive, I didn't even realize until I did some research this morning that it was about suffrage. The original the statue was originally about suffrage. I thought it was just about progressivism. Because it's been so recontextualized.
Is the statue destroyed?
No, it's just in the street.
Well,
the colonel's statue is destroyed and has been thrown into Lake Monona.
Well, that's good. Tell me about this colonel. Just the
colonel of the Union Army, ardent abolitionist, known for defending someone who was defending freed slaves.
Well, I mean, now it gets a little harder. But I will say, even in Lutheran history, Samuel Simon Schmucker,
Yeah.
the humanist of the 19th century. Well, he was a moderate abolitionist, and by that tone, moderate, it means, he wasn't really for the institution of slavery, and he even did some things in Gettysburg that one could see as being proto for abolition. But he believed white people were superior to black people, and he was open about that. So, I mean, even people that have a conviction or that act in what we might call an abolitionist manner from the 19th century could, in fact, still hold views that are reprehensible.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I understand that. And everyone, not absolutely everyone, but almost everyone from the 19th century who reached any level of political power had views that would be absolutely reprehensible by today's standards. That's where I worry about this turning into iconoclasm, is that no one then can live up to the standards necessary for public acknowledgement. Because we are all products of our time, and there are views that each of us hold that may be viewed as reprehensible in the future. Now, I'm absolutely opposed to Confederate monuments. I'm absolutely opposed to monuments to proponents of slavery and things like that. Especially people that was viewed as reprehensible at the time.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about Christopher Columbus going for a trip in the lake?
Oh, I love it.
I do too.
I love it.
I hope you can swim. Not sink to the bottom, sucker.
I don't. Historically, there's nothing to celebrate really about Christopher Columbus.
Yeah. It gets harder when you have. I mean, I fully admit that, Peter. I understand your wrestling. I mean, I don't have the emotional connection to Lady Forward, but I mean, even Lady Liberty, right? If somebody wanted to come and blow it up, which is not me. Let me be clear, just to be. I'm always worried about this First Amendment stuff now. Mm-hmm. Not me. Not interested in that. But if somebody or a group of people were to somehow do that, I would find it a little disappointing, because still the American ideal is all are created equal.
Right. And so for me, that's part of my trouble I have with the Lady Forward, is because to me, Lady Forward represents the Wisconsin ideal.
Yeah.
This is the Wisconsin Lady Liberty to me.
And so, okay, so maybe Lady Liberty was toppled because of the racism that is going on in your state. Maybe it has nothing to do with Lady Liberty, and maybe that's why Lady Liberty wasn't thrown where the Colonel was.
You mean Lady Forward?
Excuse me, Lady Forward, yes. Yeah. Maybe that's why Lady Forward wasn't chucked in the water. Was it the lake? Where'd they put the Colonel?
Yep.
All right. Maybe that's why Lady Forward is not in the lake, because, and not broken from what you're saying, but laying in the street, because then that becomes a symbolic protest of to hell with what you say is liberty until black and brown and other persons of color are free.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I can see that.
And so it becomes not that we destroy the statue, and you'll have to get back to me if I'm onto something here. I don't know if it's broken or not. It becomes not that she is destroyed, Lady Forward, but that she lays in the street symbolically to say there is not freedom right now.
I can see that. That makes more sense.
And in that case, if I was a Wisconsinite, that might have been something I would have even gotten involved with. If I had the emotional connection to Wisconsin, I could see myself doing something like that.
Yeah, I just wish they'd made a more cohesive statement about why they selected these statues and what the symbolism they're going for is.
I'm not sure that they have to do that. I think that is our work as white persons to say, why would the statue be laying down? I'm not sure Black Lives Matter has to do that. I think that's Malcolm X's by any means necessary.
Right, but Malcolm X would still come out and say, we're doing this for this reason.
Huh.
right? Because I don't think you can. I don't think you can trust white people to interpret it correctly.
Well, okay, now there's a good point. Okay, you're onto something there.
All right, again, because my initial reaction, your explanation there, that makes some modicum of sense to me. Mm-hmm. And if they'd have come out and said that, I'd have been like, okay, I get it. Uh-huh. I understand. Uh-huh. Still don't know that I'm 100% on board, but I understand.
Yeah.
And my initial thought was to go back to, again, as a person who grew up in the context of a church historian's family, was to go back to iconoclasm.
Mm. Yeah, you kept using that word, and I was sort of trying to dodge it. Sorry. You may have noticed that.
Why?
I was not taking the bait.
Why? Why not?
Because I don't think Luther in this situation, I'm thinking of the controversy with Karlstadt when Luther is at the Wartburg. I don't think Luther is helpful right now. I think how Luther responded in that time made some sense with his little people in Wittenberg, but the white supremacists are going to take that junk and they're going to say it's slow, gradual change, and you're going too fast and all that. And
well, I'm not trying to say that. I'm not even trying to compare it to that. If I'm comparing it to anything, I'm comparing it to the far more extreme Calvinist iconoclasms.
Yeah, I thought that might be somewhere that you were going to, which would be interesting, but it couldn't be so much because there's the mural of George Floyd that is going up in Minneapolis now.
That's true.
So I think this situation for us Lutherans, we could look at this in a sense. It's I want to be very careful how I do this, but in a sense, this is the Lutheran 1525 of today. Mm-hmm. Where, and I'm not trying to equate Black Lives Matter. I'm not trying to say that Black Lives Matter people are peasants. That's not what I mean. But I want to be really, really clear as to why I'm about to use this illustration here, because this is where Luther, in my opinion, fails. And in the opinion, I think, of many of us, where Luther does not put his own theology into context. Yes, he does call out the lords and the princes, and he does his due diligence, but ultimately he does not allow for any kind of rebellion from the peasants at that point. Mm-hmm. I think it's really dangerous when Lutheran theology takes that piece and says, all right, well, violence is really only allowed when it comes from the state to restrain sin in a matter of first use of the law. Mm-hmm. This to me, what is going on with the Black Lives Matter is not a matter of first use of the law, actually. It is a matter of the very gospel, because it has to do with embodied humanity, and Jesus became human. God becomes human in Jesus, rather, is what I meant to say. Mm-hmm. And thus, the very heart of gospel theology is at stake here with the Black Lives Matter movement. So the reason I compare this to 1525 in Luther's life is because I want to say, Lutherans, we screwed up in the past because, we got this conservative political theology. Oh, God. And here is a chance in the States to be, and I am going to put it this way, to be on the right side of history. Not in the sense that it is a work, but in the sense of, because we Lutherans, we always got to be worried about works. Yeah. But in the sense of, this is both embodied solidarity with our neighbors, and in cases of those of us Lutherans who are persons of color, it is the very freedom of the gospel that is put in question here. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, that was my little historical thing, which I, of course, ripped out of context and turned into a systematic argument like I always do. Poor Volker Lepine, I hope he doesn't listen to this. I'll give him more gray hair than I already have.
Is that possible?
You'll have to ask him that. I'm going to tell him you said that.
That's fine. He'll probably like it.
Yeah, he probably would. Any chance to consign me to hell, and he's happy. So
Yeah.
the systematician always resides in hell from the church historian's eyes, because church history represents heaven.
Mm-hmm.
So I have my own little corner of hell, and Bart and Jungle are there to keep me company, and
Mm-hmm.
but yeah. So I mean, uh, uh, do we disagree on this, Peter? Are we in different positions on this related to the statues and what you're calling iconoclasm?
I don't know that we are. I'm still trying to figure out my position. I think you have a much firmer position than I do.
Um, Maybe just in the sense that I've begun to reflect on it from the standpoint of what we might do as Lutherans.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm at an unfair advantage because this is directly related to my dissertation.
Right.
But I want to be clear. I picked this before it was cool.
Yeah, and for me, I have the disadvantage of this being directly related to my is really, really challenging my self-understanding as a Wisconsinite.
Uh-huh. Is that a real? Well, it must be because you've spoken about it since we've met. But I just want to phrase it as a question. That's a real deep part of you.
It is.
Wisconsin.
It is. Being a Northern Midwesterner, being a progressive Northern Midwesterner who comes from a blue-collar background, I take real pride in the fact that my grandfather worked for the Kohler Company. To this day, anytime my parents buy new fixtures, new plumbing fixtures in their house, it's always Kohler.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. One of my mother's favorite gifts I ever got for her was, so Kohler back in the 70s made a line of custom colored toilets and sinks and things like that.
Yeah.
And so to test the different colors, they test fired them on vases to see how they looked, rather than, because that's a lot less ceramics than a whole toilet or a sink or something like that.
Hmm.
But enough to give you a general idea of how it would look around curves and things like that. This was at the time that her father was working at the Kohler factory, and I bought her one of those vases online, and that's still one of her favorite gifts ever from me.
It's a Kohler vase.
Yeah. You can't buy them retail. They were only distributed in-house. So you have to buy them from someone who, worked at the Kohler factory at the time. And so this vase was in the Kohler factory at the same time as her father was.
Huh. I don't really have anything geographically like you do in terms of a deep bond. I don't consider myself an Illinoisan, for instance, even though I'm originally from there.
Well, I'm proud of things like Fightin' Bob LaFollette.
What's that?
Fightin' Bob, he was a progressive Republican back in the day, when Republicans were progressive. Part of this is part of the whole like Madison identity.
That had to be prior to Barry Goldwater.
It was. He was sort of the last of the great progressive Republicans.
Yeah.
We're pretty sure I have one of Fightin' Bob's cast iron pans.
Ooh, all right. I bet you like that.
It's my favorite pan for frying chicken.
Not fish.
No. It's just right for chicken. It's old and it's well aged. And for fish, I deep fry fish. It's not deep enough to deep fry.
Oh man, I gotta come to Wisconsin sometime and have some of that deep fried fish with you. Although,
deep fried fish.
You may be sad at me, Peter. I am becoming less of a beer drinker than I once was.
I know you're leaning more towards the vino now.
Yes, it's Volker Lepine's fault. There's so many things of this last year. This is his fault too. He is slowly moving me toward white wine.
Rieslings there in Germany?
Yeah, not Riesling, Chardonnay.
Oh, okay.
Which I also drank with some folks from Chicago before I came. Yeah, I really sort of, Chardonnay's pretty good. And I must be over 30 now because, I can have like 2 or 3 glasses of red wine and my nose gets all stuffy and my head hurts the next day. And, what the heck is happening to me?
Yeah, welcome to your 30s.
White wine doesn't seem to do that. I drink a ton of water when I drink. I eat food, all this stuff.
I also find that white wine hits me less hard than red wine. I don't drink red wine anymore. I'll only drink whites.
Oh, well, good. When I come, then I'll bring you some white wine from Baden.
Excellent. Yeah.
But not from Württemberg, because that's just acid. According to you-know-who.
Yes, right?
Oh, no, wait. There's one good white wine, and we had it together because the church historians, of which I'm not a church historian, but I'm with them in the doctoral colloquium. Mm-hmm. In case you didn't know, Peter, I'm not a church historian.
I had no idea. Shocking.
I just wanted to be clear about that. But the church historian doctoral colloquium meets at this pub I don't know. Why am I describing the Tübingen campus? Nobody's going to come visit me anyway. It doesn't matter. We meet at this pub. Sorry.
It's all right.
We meet at this lovely pub called Uncle. And Lepine and I had this lovely Chardonnay on the last couple of weeks, which he has every time that, they meet. But I finally decided to join him in having the Chardonnay rather than having the beer. And I decided not going to drink the beer there anymore because Chardonnay's so good.
There you go.
So yeah, maybe when I come and that Chardonnay is, I think, out of Württemberg. And so that's like one of the good ones. But most of them, no. He turned me off the Württemberg wine. Now I'm drinking wine out of Italy and France and Spain. And
there you go.
It raises my spirits that's kind of ironic given the literal meaning of alcohol, but anyway, it raises my spirits in these times of despair to have a nice glass of wine in the evening.
There you go. That's like me and my pipe.
Yeah. It's but when we talk about these identity things, I would say I have more of a sense of connection to the schools that I've received degrees from than where I grew up. So, there's been some stuff going on at Luther Seminary lately that just really gets to me. Coming from there and being linked to there, or there have been things that have happened at LSTC that is the same thing. So that kind of stuff gets to me, but that's not really geographical. That's more of what would you call it? Intellectual lineage. I don't know.
Yeah, something like that.
Or Linda Thomas texted me the other day, and one of Hitler's, and this probably won't be surprising to anybody, but it was to me because I received the message right as I was getting up at like 5 a.m. to make the coffee. One of Hitler's family members was a German Lutheran. Mm-hmm. And I actually got nauseous on the spot. I mean, it was just gut-wrenching for me to see that. Hitler himself was Catholic, as far as I know. He was not Lutheran. So his that's a little bit of irony. Of course, there are many things ironic about him, but knowing that he has that Lutheran linkage just it's just a punch in the gut for me.
Yeah.
But if somebody went to Chicago and tore the Sears Tower down, I wouldn't give a damn.
Which is not even the Sears Tower anymore.
No, it's the Willis Tower.
Yeah.
But having lived there for 2 years and intending to have lived there for at least five, everybody still calls it the Sears
Oh,
Tower.
absolutely. Yeah.
But that can come down, and that won't bother me. I can't think of any. Maybe the Lions. I would miss the Lions outside of the Art Institute of Chicago, but that's just because I like cats. like, I have no like. Oh, it's a statue, and somebody, I can hear it already. Somebody might comment, but what about these statues of Luther? Well, I don't care. Um, I was incensed. Do you remember? Were you still at Luther Seminary when they got this red Luther statue and put it outside the chapel, or was that after you left?
I must have been after I left.
Yeah, they got it. They got it from Germany, I think, in anticipation of 2017, and I was just incensed that there was this statue of Luther outside of the chapel on a campus that is named after the guy. I said, now that risks idolatry.
Mm.
So if somebody wants to go to Wittenberg, which again is not me, but if somebody wants to go to Wittenberg and knock the statue of Luther over, I really don't care. Given what he said. That was so anti-Semitic, and both Lepine and the another excellent historian named Christine Helmer make the claim that Luther was a lifelong anti-Semite rather.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a late development; it's throughout his whole theology. Take the statue down. I think that I just don't have that need to preserve the statue.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if somebody came in and started burning his manuscripts, that's where I'd say it's irresponsible.
Mm-hmm.
Because we need the historical records in order to point out things like that lifelong anti-Semitism.
Mm-hmm.
There's just something about having the original there. It exposes the limitation at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So that's I'm fine with. I'd like to keep that, but the statue, who cares? Knock it over. I don't. I will not shed a tear. And maybe that's heretical to say, but those statues of Luther, he's all serious and he's pointing to the Bible. I mean, that's such a 19th century construction of him anyway.
Mm-hmm.
He's not a Protestant. He's a medieval Catholic. He's a late medieval Catholic reformer. I have learned something in Tübingen this year, mm-hmm. right? So in these statues of Luther, they propose a model of the Reformation that is not accurate, and and it glorifies a man who really was a pretty big jerk. So take it down.
Yeah, I guess that's my thing. Like, I'm less opposed to tearing down the statues of actual people than I am against tearing down the statues of American and progressive ideals, like ideals that we still nominally believe in.
Oh,
I don't mind the I'm more inspired by the abstract than the concrete. If that makes sense.
Okay. But if you're more inspired by the abstract than the concrete, why aren't you saying knock all the statues down? It doesn't matter because we still have the ideas.
Well, because it's a representation of the ideas. I'm not saying, you know what I mean? Like it's inspiring art.
Then here's a compromise. Put it in a museum.
I think there's a function to public art, though. To public inspiring art. I think the statue of Forward there at the top of the Capitol Mall in Madison, at the top of State Street, begs us onward to something better. It is a rallying point for protests. It is a rallying point for people who want to make a difference. Almost every protest I've ever been a part of in Madison has started at that statue.
Maybe they'll put it back up.
Maybe they will. I mean, I'm sure they will. I can't imagine the city won't.
Well, if they haven't chucked her in the water, to me, that's the biggest sign that they were sending a different message with Lady Ford than they were with the Colonel, whoever that is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Colonel had to go for a swim for some reason, and I don't know the guy. I don't know the guy's history. You're saying he's an abolitionist, but I have come to realize just in this has really been too recent for me, but it has been recently. Through the historian from Emory University, Carol Anderson, I read her book White Rage, and so I started to hear some of these stories about these white people who were supposedly these noted abolitionists, but what they were really like.
Yeah.
And so you know, for some reason the Colonel had to go for a swim, and he ain't coming back. He drowned.
Right.
And you know, and that's probably, for whatever reason, that's what needed to happen. But that Lady Forward, who I always keep wanting to say Lady Liberty, but Lady Forward is laying in the streets. To me, it's like people who burn a flag.
Okay.
If you burn a flag, you burn it not because you hate America, but because you love it so much you hate what it has become.
Mm-hmm.
And so you set a flag on fire, but that doesn't mean that the flag isn't around in places. And I'm ambivalent about flags anyway, personally. I like the flags at Tübingen that they put up because I like the colors of Baden-Württemberg, number one. And I really like the European Union flag. And then there's also the German flag. And they put all three up. If there's some civic thing that goes on, they put it outside their main building. And you know, that's kind of fun for a civic identity. But, you know, if I never saw that again, it wouldn't break my heart. I mean, flags are an interesting symbol. And they can be deeply idolatrous. But, you know, I've never...
Believe me, as someone who studied Northern Irish history, I'm very well aware of what flags can be.
Tell us about some of that, because my understanding of Ireland is not nearly what it ought to be. So help me out with that. I'm going to get some more water. You don't have to edit this out. Our listeners can know. I've got water right over by me, but I've got to fill up my glass. But I can still hear Peter, and he'll tell us the story. Okay.
Well, so Northern Ireland is a sort of semi-nation divided. It's part of the island of Ireland, but part of the country of the United Kingdom. There's a lot of Irish Republicans, who think it ought to be part of the Irish Republic. There's a lot of British loyalists or unionists who think it ought to be part of the United Kingdom. And
it's not part of the United Kingdom?
It is.
Okay.
But they think it ought to remain part of the United Kingdom rather than be part of Ireland. And so it's gotten violent at various times between the different factions, and territory is marked out in large part by flags. You know where you are by what flags are flying. Is the British or the Ulster flag flying? Then you know you're in Unionist territory. Is the Irish flag flying? You know you're in Republican territory. It really demarks things, and it's very controversial what flags are flown where and when, particularly at the capital in Belfast. So flags can be very divisive. But they can also, you know... And there's been some effort from time to time to try and create a unified, a uniquely non-partisan Ulster flag so that both sides can celebrate their being from Northern Ireland without bringing Republican or Unionist sentiment into it. So there's a hope to create a flag that has some sort of potential for unification.
Mm-hmm.
There's also been a flag controversy in Madison.
Really?
Yeah, our old flag
from
had...
the Irish, or
No. Just for the old Madison flag had a Native American sun symbol on it.
Oh.
Yeah, well, and it was not from any of the tribes from around here.
Oh.
So back in 2017, 2018, somewhere around then, they redesigned the Madison flag with just a golden disc to replace the sun symbol. So now it has blue water. So it's you should look it up. It's a very gorgeous flag. It's voted one of the top. It's like the number 11 city flag in the world or something like that in vexillographic circles. It has a white band going through two blue sections representing the isthmus between the two lakes. It has the shape of the capital in the middle, and it has a golden sun disk in the middle of the capital.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now.
It's very pretty.
It is. It is. I'm making a mental note that you really love Madison.
I do. I always have. Even before I lived here, I loved Madison.
Oh, I didn't realize that there was a time that you didn't live in Madison. Oh, of course not, because you were at Hennepin for Latin.
Yeah.
So of course you couldn't have lived in Madison. And that. So that explains why when Lady Forward falls, I think it would have been more devastating if they would have broken her.
If they would have broken her, I don't know what I would have. I might have actually cried. Right now, I just sort of feel a grief in my heart that I'm sitting with. That I'm like, I want to understand what happened, why it happened. I want to understand the reasons behind this. And our conversation today has helped me with that some. I don't want to just blanket decry it and be like, I don't, I want to understand. But if they'd broken her, if they'd thrown her in the lake, I might have actually cried.
And I wonder if they knew that. I mean, if this is the symbolic power that you're talking about, I'm sure the people that organized this already knew that and were strategizing, and that's why she laid in the street, but the colonel had to go.
Yeah.
Is anybody going to try to Sorry, this is amusing me. Is anybody going to try to pull the colonel out of the lake?
No, I haven't heard anything about it yet. Like, again, this just happened in the wee hours of this morning.
How deep is the lake?
The lake's pretty deep, but the picture I saw, the statue was only about like half sunk.
Oh, well, that's no fun. They can still rescue him.
Yeah, lying on his back in about like, I don't know, 6 to 8 inches of water.
Now, let's say that this man, what was his name?
Oh, I don't remember. Colonel Hans van something.
All right, Colonel something, we'll call him.
Hans Christian Hegg.
Colonel Haig. Okay, Colonel Haig. Let's say that Colonel Haig wasn't perpetuating slavery and racism some way like other so-called abolitionists might have been. Let's say that he really was radical, as we would use that term today. Maybe he got tossed in the lake because of systemic racism existing and slavery existing by another name. For instance, what is the prison population of Madison made up? What do those numbers of the prison population look like?
Oh, it's incredibly racist.
Okay, so in that sense, maybe the colonel gets tossed in the water because there is no abolition, but they know what the ideal of Lady Forward is, so she just goes in the street.
Yeah.
In that sense, both of them make sense, even if this colonel was some big abolitionist, right? Because these, I've heard and seen on the internet some mutterings from some more conservative folks who are, this movement has just turned to, it's lost all connection to Black Lives Matter and all this stuff because they're tearing down these great white abolitionists. And I want to go, well, let's look at the systemic problem here and then ask, perhaps, why are they doing it? Mm-hmm. Unless it's these boogaloo folks or people like them who just want a civil war. For me, that's a separate argument.
Right. And this is definitely not boogaloo work.
Yeah. So when it comes to black protesters doing this, that's when I say, what's the context? What's the makeup of the city where the statue is in, particularly in relation to, number one, prison population, but number two, deeply connected police arrests and killings. Mm-hmm. And number three, just your basic everyday, and how sad that we have to use the adjectives basic and everyday, systemic white supremacy. Mm-hmm. What does it look like in those cities and those cities and towns where these statues are coming down? And if it's of what you and I would say we're white progressive abolitionist people, mm-hmm. I always want to know what's behind it when the protesters are doing it, because I go back to Minneapolis and when they burned that precinct down, and yet the school nearby, the protesters were rallying together. I said this on here a couple of weeks ago, to get food mm-hmm. to the children who didn't have food. And then also were coming in the mornings to clean up from the protests the night before. That is the Black Lives Matter movement.
Right.
So if they start chucking these statues down, there is a reason that it's being done. Mm-hmm. And number one, I'm still not convinced they have to tell those of us who are white what that reason is. I'm still not sold on that one. But number two, I really do think there is one, and I think that will come to light, whatever the reason is. Mm-hmm. And I haven't seen any statues toppling in Tübingen. What I like about Tübingen, by the way, is it's very open about the Nazi past mm-hmm. and the horrors that happened here. They don't hide it. There are signs all over town with what building was used for what purpose, what people were involved, how at one point the rector of the university, which is despicable, and they're very open about it. So the other argument to be made, just to play devil's advocate for a minute, if we don't want to chuck all the statues in the ocean, although I'd rather do that, but if they've got to stay, if we've got to look at Christopher Columbus, God help us, then I would want something like that, something like Tübingen has done, where the full extent of what this man perpetuated is put on public display, so that, for the explicit purpose, because now we've got to be careful, because people of color will get triggered when they see these statues. Mm-hmm. That's the other thing. Mm-hmm. And so the only reason that I might suggest keeping them would be that we say never again.
Right.
This is reprehensible. And those of us who are white people, it is our task to begin doing the work to become anti-racist, which I believe, by the way, is a lifelong process.
Oh, absolutely.
I think you probably believe that too. That's quite Lutheran, right? Mm-hmm. It's not like you wake up one morning and you get rid of it all. Wouldn't it be nice if it was? But
be gorgeous,
then the eschaton would be here. But I do think we've got to do that kind of work. And so in that sense, I could see some of these statues being kept. I'm still not convinced they need to be publicly visible. Mm-hmm. For me, as a queer person, it would be as if I lived in a town where some famous person who practiced electroshock therapy on gay people in the 1950s, for some reason, had made some big donation to some organization, and they made a statue of the guy because, oh, look, what a great humanitarian he was. Every time I walk past that thing, I would be scared to death.
Yeah. Well, again, this is why I believe in statues of ideals over statues of individuals.
What's another statue of ideals that you would like to see preserved?
Another statue of ideals that I would like to see preserved. Trying to think of ones that I know. There aren't. We do like statues of individual people, very, very much. Just a second here. I mean, there are public art statues to liberty. The Russians did it a lot. There are a lot of Russian statues to things like workers' progress and memorializing, like, I think there's a statue memorializing the defense of Stalingrad that doesn't depict any individual.
Mm.
It's just like, I'm trying to remember. It's a woman with a sword. It's called The Motherland Calls.
Well, at least it's not The Fatherland Calls.
It's huge. It's just absolutely massive. I think it's way too big, but it's...
And where is it?
It's in Volgograd, formerly Stalingrad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this woman with a sword in one hand and reaching out, calling for aid with the other.
Yeah, I don't know that statue, obviously.
But there's a lot like that in Soviet architecture, in Soviet art, that I appreciate. The statue of the ideal rather than the statue of the individual. Because, the ideal behind Soviet art is not necessarily to celebrate the individual, but to celebrate the collective, the whole country, and the country's ideals.
Okay. So you very much relate to visual art.
I do, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then it gets tricky with the question of how far do you take it, right? Mm-hmm. So we think white Christendom, for instance, and everything white Christendom has done. But if you go so far, we would lose, for instance, the music of Bach.
Right.
And I'm not sure that I would like to live the rest of my life without hearing that again, even though there are parts of his cantatas that are very problematic, let's say.
Yeah.
And, of course, there are parts of the New Testament and the Old Testament that are problematic, to understate it.
Right.
So how far do we go? And I've been doing something interesting now that I'm working on Hebrew. When I translate Hebrew, if I run into something that in the NRSV would translate as children of Israel,
mm-hmm.
I actually translate it as sons of Israel. Because that is what it means in a literal sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to show full force the problematic nature of this text from a 21st century standpoint. It brings out the foreignness of it.
Mm-hmm.
So for things like that, I want to show it front and center and not hide it and make it try to be something that it isn't.
Right.
I'm not sure what you think about that approach. You've done some Hebrew as well.
I have. I think for personal use or for academic use, that's fine. But when presenting to parishioners or the wider public,
then I would do the gender inclusive and the gender expansive,
yep.
even, because that would be too difficult of a a concept to try to engage in, you'd do so many backflips and you'd unnecessarily trigger people. And
exactly.
there are a whole list of reasons not to do that. But in my own work, I really want to force myself. I guess I should keep it in the personal terms. I want to force myself to see the strangeness of this text. Number one, also the beauty of it. But the strangeness of it and the fact that it does have limitations. This did not drop out of heaven.
No, absolutely.
Shame. Would be nice if it did. Would make life easier.
So much easier.
So, yeah, I mean, we were talking when we had Reggie Williams on, Peter, I mentioned with the Stiftskirche in Tübingen, I want to take down the white Jesus.
Right.
And I still want to take down the white Jesus, even though that is my church, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah, and I had that same issue at one of the churches that I was at when they were considering repainting the Jesus. I stopped and thought for a moment whether or not to encourage them to darken the skin tone a little bit on the repainting. I wasn't sure it was appropriate considering he still had European features.
Yeah.
Right, I didn't want a blackface Jesus.
Yeah.
So I didn't provide any input on that. I did provide input on the color of the robe.
I don't know enough about blackface. We can talk about that another time. I have to.
Can we not?
Well, okay, or we can not, and I'll just read up on it. And
that sounds good.
So sorry, listeners, if you don't know what it is, you have to look it up yourselves because we're not discussing it on here. Apparently,
it's just that's so much to get into with blackface and everything.
Yeah, well, all right then. We won't go there, but
no, I did get into the robe because they wanted to repaint the robe red. From yellow.
And what's help me out why you didn't
because
do it right?
The different robes indicate different things depending on your depiction of Jesus. Jesus with a red robe is usually traditionally what they call wounded heart Jesus. And he's a pre-crucifixion. It's a pre-crucifixion depiction of Christ.
Okay.
Jesus with a yellow robe is the risen triumphant Lord. And is generally depicted with the wounds. Now, the Jesus at this church had the wounds in the hands and the feet.
I see.
And I was so we have to stay with yellow for the triumphant Jesus. For the resurrected Christ. I had this whole historical presentation on it. They found it fascinating.
I mean, if I'd have been the pastor, I'd have been like, I really don't care what color you paint the robe. I'm more concerned about his skin tone than his robe color.
Well, I didn't want to start that fight, so I wanted to make sure they got at least something right.
Well, okay, fair. And, it's still, I'd still like to take down that painting in the Stiftskirche, but, on the other hand... No, there really isn't another hand. There really is no on the other hand. I would like to see that painting removed. Now there are statues of saints and so on. Of course, they're all white. It's all European. There's some old dead dukes in there from the last centuries and so on. Fine. Leave the statues and some of the paintings, and that's fine. But really. The focal point there up front where the altar is, and then the pulpit is really high on the left, like it's a real Lutheran pulpit. But the altar is up there, and so the focal point of where your eyes see is this white Jesus hanging on the cross, and I don't know how old it is. I don't know, does it go back 100 years? Does it go back, with the Stiftskirche, go back 500 years? What do I know?
Right.
And so it is complicated, but I really would like to remove that. I won't, by the way. Let me be clear. This is not me that's going to do this.
You're not going to be the change you want to see in the world.
Well, I would be the change I want to see in the world in this instance with a committee composed of several people after I've lived in Tübingen long enough that people can actually hear what I'm trying to say, and then would go about it that way, because they're really, in these instances, I don't think there's much use coming in like a ton of bricks.
Right.
With the statues and stuff, blow them all up. Who cares? Except Lady Ford. You've convinced me that Lady Ford might be kind of cool.
Thank you.
But, the rest of them, who cares? But with these controversies in the church, I think we have a better, particularly if we're dealing with majority white or overwhelmingly majority white congregations, we have a better chance of being heard if we come at it in such a way that is both firm but approachable, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's always the balance in those situations. But there does, this is not a slow gradual change and just wait for things to get better. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
That's where the firmness does come in, but it's also a reaching out in true love, that people can hear what you're saying, so that the work can get done for the sake of the kingdom. Mm-hmm. Anyway, on that note, I think we've, I don't want to say beaten a dead horse, but we've certainly examined the role of visual art in society and church in the last hour.
Yep.
Side note, I'm not a particularly visually inclined person. So... except when it comes to Jesus. And that's actually where I would draw the line. I think if people started destroying crucifixes, I think that would be very hard for me. Although, admittedly, if they were white crucifixes, it would be less hard.
Well, fortunately, in America, there are not a ton of publicly funded public statues of Jesus.
Well, no, and there aren't in Germany either. At least the none that I've seen. But I'm just thinking that if this were to, if there would be a recreation somehow of the conflict between Luther and Karlstadt.
Oh yeah.
He's at the Wartburg. That would be very difficult. I think if all of that. But on that note, until next week, I'm Brach Jennings,
and I'm Peter Clark.
And this is your friendly neighborhood Lutheran theology podcast, occasionally iconoclastic, but not too much, Stumbling Block.
Stumbling Block is a production of Silver Turkey Studios. Our Patreon producer is Ben Dittman, our executive producer is Peter Clark, and our executive director is Brach Jennings. Our theme music is by Mirrors for Windows, and we are hosted by Podbean. We can be reached by email at stumblingblockpodcast@gmail.com. Please consider supporting us at patreon.com/stumblingblock. And as always, thank you for listening.